Welcome back to Cards Comics, and today I'm starting something I'm calling Vintage Card Update. Woo woo! Alright, here we go. We're going to do some vintage card analysis and reporting, and looking at my channel, I haven't done a vintage card update in a while, since April. So we're looking at my video here, and if you haven't seen this video, you should go to it. It's really cool. I'll link it in the video. And yeah, I've got 118 views, so not a lot of you have seen it. In fact, you haven't seen my Marvel Universe card set with Carnage. Only 18 of you guys seen that, so you know it's pretty low. So I'm just saying you can see that video if you want. We're going to start here with the 1961 top set because 1961 tops are very common. And I'm going to focus on three players. I'm going to focus on Mickey Mantle, Hank Aaron, and Willie Mays. Sorry for the pregnant pause there. I lost my train of thought. Anyway, here we go. We're going to talk about Mickey Mantle, 61 tops. Now, looking at this pricing here, you can see pricing for this Mickey Mantle has stabilized, and it has not really gone up since, you know, the $8,500 paid back in May. We all know that was when it was crazy town, and you know, this one $5,600 price here from REA. Obviously, we can't really look at auction prices versus eBay prices because there's always some a little bit of difference in value there. You know, there might be some shilling going on in some of those auctions. You never know. Just saying. They always seem to be higher. Just saying. But anyway, looks pretty stable, right around that VCP average of $4,200. I would say a good price for this card is $4,000 or below. $3,500 to $4,000, and you got yourself a deal, buckaroo. Here we go. 61 Aaron. So this card has gained tremendously in popularity. It was a $500 card a year ago. And one thing I didn't mention here in 61 is how often this card is sold, because availability is becoming an issue with vintage cards. So if you look at this card sold 2, 3, 6, 7 times since June. And if you go back to June of 2020, if I go here and show the last 100, I can see that in 2020 this card sold 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. So not too shabby. So this card seems to be normal availability, but some cards aren't. I'll get to that later. Now back to the Hank Aaron. You can see again, this card has gone through some roller coaster, and obviously if you flatten this thing out, you'll see that this card was again $500 card. Now it's averaging $1,800. The last sale of $1,500. So I would say, based on throwing out this little turd of a price here from someone doing a buy it now without really looking at what the prices were, you can see this card should be, you know, close to $1,500, and I think that would be a good price. $1,500 to $1,700 to get yourself a deal, and it is definitely still pretty volatile. I would say this card is seeing some ups and downs, but you know, I think it's reasonable because this card is getting popular, and 7 cards sold since June, and this card's only sold twice compared to the Mantle. And that is an important distinction, because what I'm going to say to you guys is that since April, I'm seeing that really popular cards like the 61 Aaron, for some reason, and some Maze cards are just not selling as often on eBay or in general, any auctions. I do think some hoarding is going on. Go 61 Maze, and you can see this card has sold 2, 4, 5 times since June, and average price is $1,200. Now you go back way in the Wayback Machine to 2016, 2017. This was a $300 card, so now it sold last at $700 in auction. That's a pretty big steep decline from the highs of $2,500 and $1,500 now. This card is one of the most available cards of Willie Mays out there in a PSA 8 or better. And I'll go back to why I'm doing PSA 8s. I'm doing PSA 8s because from a collector perspective, they are the grade most commonly traded in high grade, and they have the highest pop generally versus a 9 or 10. And from a collector standpoint, in 1960s, the 8s are highly sought after. 7s are more common, but they are less let's say, wanted than the 8s. That's just how vintage guys roll. They like the 8s. 9s are sort of high rollers. 10s are pretty much unattainable. And so 8s are the common, think of them as CGC 9.8s or modern PSA 10s. This is what the most common currency in vintage cards are, is PSA 8s. And you can see this card has gone through ups and downs, but I think $1,000 and you got yourself a deal for this card, which is 3 times higher than it was a couple years ago. And in general, that's the common theme. This card was $500, now it's $1,500. This card, the Mantle card, was $3,000 and it's $4,000. Maybe not so much there, but you can scroll it out and you can see down here in the depths of 2018, it was $2,700, $2,800, so double. Mantle cards are already expensive, so they had a lot, less room to move into, whereas the Maze and Aaron and Clemente cards were very cheap for a long time. Now you move to 65 Mantle, and you can see this card is a flat line. Not much heartbeat there. Boop, 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 and through there, and pretty flat. And so you got the card $4,000 across the board, $4,000, not doing much. Okay, moving on to 65 Aaron. 65 Aaron is seeing again a lot of the more of a different heartbeat, a little more irregular heartbeat here. Again, $1,000 gets you a deal, and I think it's right. It seems like a good price for this card, and compared to the $280 it was bringing a little over a year ago in 2020, in February 2020, that seems like a good deal. 3 times the value. Very common for Maze and Aaron cards. Now, availability, going back over here, the Mantle card has sold 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 times. So 7 or 8 times seems to be a common for 3 months worth of sales. This card sells a couple times a month. 65 Aaron has sold 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times, a couple times a month. That seems very common. You get to the Maze and you'll see the card is flatlined here at around $1,000, very similar to the Mr. Aaron. However, 1 sale in June, that's it. And this leads me to my thought here. As we see these prices starting to kind of either dip or average out, and some cards slightly going up, I'm seeing just an availability issue with some cards. You saw it with the 61 Aaron, the 65 Maze. They're getting popular, and as people are starting to build their collections, the positioning themselves in the vintage market, certain cards are being targeted. And if you look at eBay right now for the 65 Maze, you'll see that there's not a single card available on eBay right now under $1,650. There's your low price card right there, $1,650. Everything else is closer to $2,000. Now you look at the VCP for that card, and you'll see that it is $1,000. So you can pay 1.5 times or more for that card. You might get it for $1,500, but that card isn't sold for $1,500. Well, since May, when it was everything was crazy town. So now we've got this really interesting time period where you've got this card just not selling, and where beforehand, you go back to February and March, it was selling 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times between February and April, right? It was sold a lot in January. It sold in January 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times alone in January. But now between March and June and August, it's selling 1 time. That's suspicious. The card is not that rare. Let's go to the handy dandy pop report for you guys. I've done it by year. Now this was done a couple months ago, but in general the numbers may have changed, but the overall ratios are the same. And you can see the 65 Willie Mays is right in the middle, smack dab in the middle of rarity for the PSA 8. And you can see that it's only toppled by cards like the 59, the 61, which is high, very high, very, very high. We talked about 61s. The 67, the 70, the 72, and 73. So in reality, it's one of the top 5 cards. It's like number 6, in terms of or 7 in terms of the total number available, right? So it's, it's the 7th most available Willie Mays card by PSA 8 standards. And just if you go to high grade, which is 7 through 10, and come on, little buddy, you can see that the 65 again, has 7 through 10 grade. It is pretty high. It's actually 4th on the list here. Only trailing 72, 73, and 61 again, which is why I'm warning you guys. This is my PSA of the day. 61 Topps cards have a lot of availability generally across the board. So don't overpay for those 61 Topps cards, guys. They are everywhere. Generally speaking, I'll caveat that with vintage cards in general have low pops across the board compared to modern cards. So if you compare a LeBron James 2003 refractor or base card to a 65 Willie Mays, it won't make any sense, so don't do that. You got to compare years versus years, and 61 Topps versus other cards from the 60s are a lot more available. That's the point. All right, so moving on from this, we're going to go back to our handy dandy VCP. I'll do a plug for VCP. I'm not getting paid by them, but I will say I'm using them as my source of data. That if you're in vintage cards, you've got to use VCP. They are the best. And so I got into this idea of like maybe the Willie Mays cards are just getting hoarded in general. And so I went to 63 because I knew the 63 had sold recently because I was watching it, and it did pretty well, $2,000 for the last sell. But it sold 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times, so that seems pretty normal. So that didn't seem like abnormal, and the card is flatlined right around that $1,800 to $2,000 range. So the 63, and it has caught up a little bit to the 66. So the 66 used to be kind of miles ahead of the 63, and now it is really caught it. And you go back to 2018, this card was still selling, $1,500. If you go back to the 63, and you just go back, a few years, this card, had started at like $700, at one point, and $1,100, in 2021. You go back to just June of 2020, this card was $600, and it's gone to $2,000, pretty close to regularly, $1,800, $2,000. The 66, has not done that. It has gone up just a little bit more. I don't know why. I don't know why the 66 is so not targeted by these people buying these cards. I think it's the number 1 card in the set. It should be condition-wise harder to get. If you go to the handy dandy pop report, you see that the 66. I go back to my handy dandy pop report. You see the 66 is very low, and PSA 8s. It's right there at 228. That is one of the lower pop reports that's out there, so I don't know why the 63, because if you go to the 63 Topps, it has more cards available right here, 309 versus 228, than the 66. So in theory, it should be worth less, but it's really gaining in popularity. I think people just like the 63 set much more than 66. And yeah, so I threw in a 62 Topps here because that card's really rare. It's only sold once in 2021, and so you can't really tell pricing, but $6,000 basically. Who knows what this card comes up again, what it'll sell for. It's super rare. I have one, and it's one of my favorite cards of all time, but it's super rare. So what about other sports? So going into 81 Topps, you've got Larry Bird here. This card has gone nuts. I had one in a 9. I sold it around $2,000, and the card is now $1,000. It peaked over here at some crazy pants number of $5,000. It had some weird spike here at $4,400 for no real reason from the pit. I don't know what's going on there. This card sells a ton. It sells since June, 50 times. So this card sells all the time. It's high pop count. So that it makes sense it's going down. So where's it going to end? I don't know if it's reached the floor yet. I think this card is $500-$600 eventually. It is going down. Now I go to football. Started out with a Jim Brown card, and this is a very common Jim Brown card. It's not like the 62 Topps, which is very hard to get in the PSA 8, or a 58, which is a rookie card. It's a pretty common card, and that's why you see it's pretty flat. It's not doing much. $800 to $900. $850. very common. So not a hard card to get, but you know, it's very interesting. Again, availability, right? It shouldn't be that hard to get, but one has sold since March. One in a heritage auction. Like, what is going on, guys? Like, the vintage football cards have disappeared. You go to eBay, which this card, you know, always sells a lot, and you see that there is definitely more sales here. But what's going on, man? Like, there is definitely, and a lot of these are PWCC auctions, or from the vault, people buying cards from people's vaults. You know, two of the sales here are from vault, and I just feel like, you know, vintage football is, you know, hard to find sometimes. Comparatively, Pop Report, I'm working on a video right now where I'm going to show Pop Reports and values of vintage football versus baseball, and I make the analogy that, you know, like the 8th year Juan Marichal is worth more than the 3rd year Joe Green or Terry Bradshaw card, you know, because just baseball is worth a lot more for the Hall of Famers in their 10th or 12th year than a lot of Hall of Fame rookie cards in football or their 2nd or 3rd year. Even from really tough sets. So it's just interesting. But, you know, this Jim Brown and this Terry Bradshaw, you know, and I can go into multiple cards, but I just use these to show you the example of availability is low. Though not a lot of these cards are up for sale. But you go to something like the 79 Gretzky. I threw a hockey card in here just to give you another example of a hot card. This card sells, you know, 20, 30 times, you know, since June. But, you know, in August alone, this card has sold 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 times. It sells all the time. It sells twice a week, you know, versus the 61 Jim Brown, which sold once in 3 months. I mean, it just shows you, like, you know, the availability of some of these cards is just really low. And again, you know, I showed you, and here's another thing that it's very interesting to me is, you know, when I was doing vintage, you know, first started really getting into vintage, I talked to dealers and they told me, look, you need to look at Mickey Mantle as your highest amount of cards available. If you want to really look at availability of cards and say, okay, the Mantle will be your highest available number because everyone's going to send their Mantle in, even if it's a 3 or 4. And so you'll have the highest pop count on Mantle because, you know, for a card that's not a short print, it'll show you kind of what is available for other cards. If all the other cards were sent in, because everyone sends their Mantle in, right? Well, I go to 65, okay, and this is the pop count from PSA, active, live, and you can see I had 411 8s for Willie Mays. This is Willie Mays, back in, that would have been in April. So that 98 more 8s have been graded since April. 98, that's a lot, considering that's basically almost, what, 20% of its total pop count has just been graded in the last 3 months. That's pretty impressive. And but the number here is 3,000 total cards graded, 509 8s. I go to Mickey Mantle, and I was just expecting that there would be more 8s and more cards. Now, there is definitely more cards, 4,700, so 1,700 more cards. There is less 8s for Mickey Mantle and PSA 8 than there is Mays, with 1,700 cards more graded. That shows two things to me, guys. Just on a little bit of soapbox here, but it shows me that A, that maybe the Mantle card's a little harder to get graded, but B, this idea of pop control, that PSA is obviously trying to protect certain cards from having high pops. Why would there be 1,700 more Mantles? Obviously, some of them are going to be 3s and 4s because they're worth a lot of money still. But man, it seems very fishy to me that with 1,700 more cards graded, that the Mantle card, which isn't hard to find, is, you know, much less, has that many fewer 8s. So, all right, so we'll go back to my other chart here, and you know, I guess more of the story here, guys, is you know, a few points here. A, the card market stabilizing for vintage. Nothing is really going through the roof again. No chart I've looked at of any card, even really good cards, is doing this giant spike again. You know, we're not seeing the spike. You know, we're not seeing this giant, you know, massive peak anymore. Everything's flattening out or slightly rising. 2, availability is an issue. With PWCC going into their private auction, you know, not selling on eBay anymore, Having high levels of vintage cards on eBay is going to be a challenge. They're going to be harder to find. When they go in these auction houses, they sell for more money because they just do. I think, one of the obvious reasons could be shill bidding. Another reason could just be when people that are in those auction houses have more money to spend and they're just willing to pay more. I just think that's how it is. When you're on eBay and you're seeing this card sell every other week, you just kind of wait for the next one, wait for the next one, wait for the next one, wait for the next one. And I don't think you're going to wait for the next one anymore. I had a video where I purchased my 65 Clemente, and I got to the point where I was waiting for an 8.5, and I realized if I keep waiting for the 8.5, I may never finish the set. I've been working on it for 30 years. A great 8 came up. I bought it for basically right at its VCP value, and I'm done. And I think a lot of collectors are going to start doing that. You're going to see a lot of collectors just taking the best card available, closest to the grade they want, and just kind of moving through to get their collection done. And they can't really wait for the perfect card to show up anymore. Whereas beforehand, you could have a lot of options. You could wait week after week, see multiple versions of the same card. And these cards are going away. I don't know if they're going into permanent collections, if they're going into these, where you can fractional share companies. I don't know where they're going, and if they're going into people's vaults and never coming out. But this card should be available, and it's not. The 61 Jim Brown should be available, but it's not. One card sold in the last 5 months. One. That card should be selling 2 or 3 times at least a month. The 65 Maze, one card sold in the last 3 months. This card should be selling 2 or 3 times a month. I don't know, guys. I think if you're really trying to collect sets and finish your sets, or just get into a position here where vintage cards are part of your portfolio, availability is an issue right now, and we're going to have to think about it. Are we going to have to just go to these other auction houses, and you're going to have to join REA, you're going to have to join Golden, you're going to have to join PWCC's own website to buy cards now. I think eBay is going to, for vintage cards, could be a thing of the past. It might go the way and just be a place to buy new cards, and vintage cards are somewhere else. You have to go to Heritage or other auction houses to get your vintage cards. So, all right, guys, that's my take today. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you next time.